Hana Kang stared at the contract on her datapad for the 5th time. The numbers were real. 6 months of teaching on a space station would pay more than 3 years of work back on Earth. She sat in her small apartment in Seoul, looking at the rain outside her window. The teaching jobs on Earth were hard to find. Too many teachers, not enough positions. But out there, in the stars, they needed someone like her. The job posting was strange, though. It said the Threxian Empire needed a human tutor. It did not say why it had to be a human. It did not explain what happened to the previous teachers. Hana had heard of the Threxians before. They were big, strong, and liked to fight. Their empire controlled 12 star systems. They had made peace with humans 20 years ago, but it was an uneasy peace. Hana pressed her thumb on the screen. The contract was accepted. 3 weeks later, she stood inside a transport ship, heading to Viridian Reach Station. The journey took 14 days. Hana spent most of it reading about Threxian culture. They valued strength above everything. Their children trained for combat from age 4. Family honor meant everything to them. Showing weakness was the worst shame possible. She wondered how she would teach students who came from such a different world. When the transport docked at Viridian Reach, Hana felt her stomach drop. The station was massive, built like a military fortress. Threxian soldiers walked everywhere, their 4 arms carrying weapons, their thick exoskeletons making heavy sounds on the metal floors. They were all taller than her. Most of them stared at her as she walked past. Some looked curious. Others looked annoyed. A Threxian officer met her at the docking bay. He did not introduce himself. He just grabbed her bags with 2 of his arms and started walking. Hana hurried to keep up. They walked through long corridors filled with soldiers and workers. Everything looked gray and cold. There were no decorations, no colors, just metal and function. They reached a large door. The officer pressed a button, and the door opened. Inside was a massive Threxian with dark red skin and golden markings on his exoskeleton. He wore armor that looked expensive. His 4 arms were crossed as he looked down at Hana. "I am Warlord Thexlar, commander of this station," he said. His voice was deep and rough. "You are the human teacher." "Yes, sir. My name is Hana Kang. I'm here to teach your young ones," Hana said. She tried to sound confident. The warlord made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We have had 17 teachers try to educate these cubs in 2 years. All of them failed. The cubs are too wild, too aggressive. They fight each other. They break things. They will not listen." "Why do you think I'll be different?" Hana asked. "I do not think you will be different," the warlord said. "But the Empire wants us to try human methods. They say humans are good at teaching difficult students. I think you are too soft. Your species has no natural weapons, no armor, no real strength. The cubs will test you. They will try to make you run away like the others." He walked to a large window. Outside, Hana could see part of the station and the stars beyond. These cubs are the children of commanders and leaders. They are meant to be the future of our people, but they are failing. If you can teach them anything, it will be a miracle. If you fail, at least we can say we tried the human way. Hana felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. "When do I meet them?" "Now," the warlord said. He pressed another button. "Let us see how long you last." They walked to a different section of the station. Hana could hear noise before they even reached the classroom. Shouting, crashing sounds. Something that sounded like fighting. The warlord opened the door, and Hana stepped inside. The classroom was chaos. 12 young Threxians were everywhere. They were smaller than adults, but still almost as tall as Hana. 2 of them were fighting in the corner, their 4 arms locked together as they pushed and shoved. 3 others were throwing learning tablets at each other. 1 was standing on a desk, roaring at the ceiling. The furniture was overturned. Papers were scattered across the floor. When the door opened, they all stopped and looked at her. 12 pairs of eyes focused on Hana. She could see their teeth. Even as children, they looked dangerous. Their exoskeletons were lighter than adults, but their claws were sharp. One of them, bigger than the others with dark gray skin, walked toward her slowly. "You are the new teacher?" the large cub asked. His voice was rough even though he was young. "You are so small. So soft." The other cubs laughed. They started moving closer, surrounding her. Hana could feel her heart beating fast. The warlord stood by the door, watching, waiting to see what she would do. The large cub reached out with one arm, touching her shoulder. Not hard, but testing, seeing if she would back away. The other cubs watched carefully. This was a test. If she showed fear, she would lose them forever. Hana looked at the cub's eyes. Then she did something no one expected. She walked past him, moved to the center of the destroyed classroom, and sat down on the floor. She pulled out an old pack of cards from her bag. Without looking at any of the cubs, she started laying out cards in front of her, playing a game by herself. The cubs stared at her. The large one looked confused. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Hana did not answer. She kept playing her game, moving cards from one pile to another. The room became quiet. The cubs looked at each other, unsure what to do. Their new teacher was not running. She was not yelling. She was not trying to dominate them. She was just sitting there, playing cards, completely ignoring them. One by one, the cubs sat down around her, curious about this strange human who did not act like prey or like an authority figure. The warlord, still standing by the door, watched with surprise in his eyes. Maybe this human was different after all. 3 weeks had passed since Hana's first day. The classroom looked different now. The desks were arranged in a circle. Maps hung on the walls, showing battles from Earth's history. Small wooden pieces were scattered on tables, representing armies and soldiers. The cubs still had their wild energy. But now that energy had a direction. Hana stood at the board, drawing simple shapes. "War is not about being the strongest," she said. "War is about being the smartest." The large gray cub, whose name was Crix, raised one of his 4 arms. "My father says strength wins all battles." "Does it?" Hana asked. She pointed to a map on the wall. 300 Spartans held off thousands of Persian soldiers at Thermopylae. The Spartans were outnumbered. They should have lost in minutes. Why did they last for days? A female cub with silver markings, named Vessa, spoke up. The place they fought was narrow. Only a few soldiers could attack at once. "Exactly," Hana said. "They used the terrain. They used strategy. The Persians had more strength, but the Spartans had better position." She looked around at all 12 cubs. Strength without thinking is just noise. But thinking with strength? That is power. The cubs leaned forward, interested. Hana had learned something important in those 3 weeks. These young Threxians were not stupid. They were not bad. They were just bored. Their previous teachers had tried to make them sit still and memorize facts, but these cubs were born warriors. They needed to move, to compete, to challenge themselves. So, Hana taught them through games. She taught them chess, where they learned to plan several moves ahead. She taught them Go, where they learned about controlling territory. She taught them poker, where they learned about reading opponents and bluffing. Every game taught them something useful. Every game made them think. But the biggest change came when Hana introduced team exercises. Threxian culture was all about individual strength. The strongest fighter became the leader. Everyone else followed or got out of the way. The cubs had grown up fighting each other for dominance. Cooperation was foreign to them. "Today we play Capture the Flag," Hana announced one morning. She divided them into 2 teams of 6. Crix and Vessa were on opposite teams. Both of them wanted to be leaders. Both of them were used to doing things alone. The first game was a disaster. Each cub tried to win by themselves. They ran in different directions with no plan. They fought each other instead of working together. Hana's team, with Crix, lost badly because Crix tried to capture the flag alone and got surrounded. After the game, Crix was angry. His exoskeleton flushed darker with frustration. "My team was weak," he growled. "No," Hana said firmly. "Your team had no plan. You had 6 warriors, but you fought like one. Vessa's team won because 3 of them worked together to distract you, while 2 others grabbed the flag. She made them play again. And again. And again. Each time, she stopped the game to point out what worked and what did not. Slowly, the cubs began to understand. When 2 of them worked together, they could defeat a stronger opponent. When they communicated and planned, they could predict what the other team would do. By the end of the week, both teams moved like machines. They used hand signals Hana taught them. They set up ambushes. They sacrificed their position to help teammates. Crix learned to hold back and direct his team instead of rushing in. Vessa learned to trust her teammates to execute the plan. The parents started noticing changes. They watched through security cameras, confused by what they saw. Their children were working together. Their children were thinking before acting. Their children were becoming something new. One afternoon, Hana was eating lunch in the station's human quarters. There was only one other human on the station, a medical officer named Yuna Park. Yuna was older, maybe 40, with tired eyes and gray in her black hair. "You know what you're doing is dangerous, right?" Yuna said quietly. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. "You're changing how they think. The Threxians value individual strength. You're teaching their children that cooperation is better." "I'm teaching them options," Hana said. "They can still be strong individually, but now they also know how to be strong together." "Some Threxians won't like that," Yuna warned. "There are factions here that think human influence is corrupting their culture. They think we make them weak." Hana thought about that. She had noticed some of the adult Threxians looking at her with distrust. Not all of them approved of her methods. But the cubs were learning. They were growing. That had to count for something. Back in class, Hana introduced a new concept. "Today we talk about asymmetric warfare," she said. The cubs looked confused by the big words. "It means fighting when you are weaker than your enemy. How do you win when you cannot win through strength?" She told them stories from human history. She told them about guerrilla fighters who defeated larger armies by avoiding direct combat. She told them about the Vietnam War, where a smaller force defeated a powerful military through patience and strategy. She told them about how Native Americans used knowledge of the land to fight colonizers. The cubs absorbed everything. Their minds were sharp, hungry for knowledge. They asked questions. They debated with each other. They ran simulations using the wooden pieces on the tables, creating battles and trying different strategies. Crix stayed after class one day. "Teacher Hana," he said, "why do humans fight this way? Why not just get stronger?" Hana smiled. "Because we cannot get stronger than many of our enemies. Threxians are naturally tougher than humans. Your exoskeleton protects you. Your 4 arms give you advantages, but humans still survive. We still thrive. We do it by thinking differently." "Is that why the warlord hired you?" Crix asked. "To make us think like humans?" "Maybe," Hana said. "Or maybe he just wanted someone different to try. But I'll tell you something important. I'm not trying to make you think like humans. I'm trying to make you think for yourselves. Take what I teach and make it your own. Combine it with Threxian strength. Become something new." Crix nodded slowly, processing this. As he left, Hana saw something in his eyes that had not been there before. Not just intelligence, but wisdom. The cub was starting to understand that there were many kinds of strength. That night, Warlord Thexlar reviewed the security footage of the classroom. He watched his son coordinate 5 other cubs in a complex tactical exercise. He watched them communicate without words, moving like a single unit. He watched them solve problems that would have stumped adult warriors. The warlord did not know if he should be proud or worried. His son was becoming formidable, but in a way that defied traditional Threxian values. Was this good for his people? Or was it the beginning of something dangerous? He would have his answer soon enough. 4 months into her contract, Hana noticed something was wrong. Small things at first. Her supply shipments from Earth arrived late. The fresh food she ordered never came. Her requests for teaching materials got lost in the system. When she tried to send messages back to Earth, the communication system had errors. She mentioned it to Yuna during their weekly dinner. They sat in the small human quarters, eating reconstituted meals that tasted like cardboard. "I think someone is blocking my communications," Hana said. Yuna put down her fork. She looked at the door, then at the walls, as if checking for listening devices. "How long has this been happening?" 3 weeks, Hana said. "At first I thought it was just technical problems. But every time I try to contact Earth, something goes wrong. And yesterday, station security told me I cannot leave the education wing without permission." Yuna's face became pale. "Hana, I need to tell you something. 6 months ago, there were 8 human contractors on this station. Now, there are only 2. Me and you." "Where did the others go?" Hana asked. "They left. Or at least that is what we were told. But I saw one of them. A man named Tay, who worked in engineering. He was packing his things in a hurry. He looked scared. He told me to be careful, that something bad was happening. Then he was gone the next day." Hana felt cold fear in her stomach. "What do you think is happening?" "I think there is a group here that does not want humans on the station," Yuna said quietly. "They think we are corrupting Threxian culture. They want us gone." That night, Hana could not sleep. She lay in her small room, thinking about the cubs. They had changed so much in 4 months. They were still fierce and competitive. But now they worked together. They thought before acting. They asked questions instead of just following orders. Some of the Threxian parents loved it. Others clearly did not. 2 days later, Yuna sent Hana an urgent message. "Meet me in the lower storage area. Section D. Come alone." Hana felt nervous as she made her way down. The lower levels of the station were darker, less maintained. She found Yuna waiting near some old cargo containers. The medical officer looked frightened. "I found something," Yuna said. She held up a small data pad. This was in the trash near the medical bay. Someone tried to wipe it, but they did not do a good job. "I recovered some files." She showed Hana the screen. It was full of encrypted messages. Yuna had managed to decode some of them. Hana read the words and felt sick. The messages talked about removing human influence from the station. They mentioned Hana by name. They discussed waiting until her contract was almost finished, then arresting her on false charges. "There is more," Yuna said. She scrolled down. "They are planning a tribunal. They will accuse you of contaminating Threxian youth with dangerous ideas. They will say you are teaching the cubs to question authority and reject traditional values." "That is exactly what I am teaching them," Hana said. "To think for themselves." "I know," Yuna said. "And that is why they want you gone. The leader of this group is Admiral Zendros. He is very powerful. He controls most of the military forces on this station. He believes humans are making Threxians weak." Hana looked at the messages again. "When is this tribunal supposed to happen?" "In 2 weeks, Yuna said. "But it could be sooner." "These messages are from last week." "Hana, you need to leave. We should contact Earth, request emergency extraction." "That will take weeks," Hana said. "And they are blocking my communications anyway. By the time Earth responds, the tribunal will be over." They stood in silence for a moment. Hana thought about running. She could try to sneak onto a supply ship. She could hide until a transport arrived. But that meant leaving the cubs behind. It meant letting the Admiral win. It meant all the progress they made would be wasted. I am not leaving, Hana said finally. You cannot fight them, Yuna argued. This is their station, their military, their laws. You are one human teacher against an admiral with an army. Then I will use what I have, Hana said. I will use my 2 weeks. 9. Over the next days, Hana changed her teaching. She did not tell the cubs directly what was happening. They were children. She would not burden them with adult problems. But she could prepare them. She could give them tools they might need. She taught them about corrupt authority. She told them stories of leaders who betrayed their people. She taught them about the Nuremberg trials, about soldiers who followed evil orders and were held accountable. She taught them that strength meant standing up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. She taught them about protecting the vulnerable. She created scenarios where they had to defend non-combatants against superior forces. She showed them how small groups could resist powerful enemies through intelligence and careful planning. She taught them about the difference between legal and right. She explained how sometimes laws were unjust, and how people throughout history had chosen conscience over compliance. The cubs absorbed it all. They were smart enough to sense something was wrong. Vesa approached Hana after class one day. The silver-marked female looked worried. Teacher Hana, are you in trouble? Vesa asked directly. Hana wanted to lie, to protect her, but she had taught these cubs to value honesty. I might be, she admitted. There are some Threxians who do not like what I am teaching you. They think I am making you weak. Vesa's eyes flashed with anger. You made us stronger. I know, Hana said. But not everyone sees it that way. Crix was listening from nearby. He came over. His forearms crossed. At 8 years old, he already carried himself like a leader. What will happen to you? He asked. I do not know, Hana said honestly. But whatever happens, you cubs need to remember what you learned here. You are stronger together than apart. You can think for yourselves. You do not have to be what others expect you to be. That evening, Hana found a notice on her door. The tribunal had been moved up. Instead of 2 weeks, she had 5 days. Instead of 12 hours notice, she had just received it now. They were accelerating their plan. Yuna came to her room, tears in her eyes. I tried to send a message to Earth. The system locked me out. They know, we know. Hana sat on her bed, thinking hard. 5 days. What could she do in 5 days? She was one unarmed human on a military station, controlled by people who wanted her gone. She had no weapons, no allies among the Threxian adults, no way to contact Earth for help, but she had something else. She had 12 students who loved her. 12 young minds she had trained to think strategically. 12 cubs who knew how to work together and solve impossible problems. No, she told herself. They are children. I will not put them in danger. But even as she thought it, she knew the cubs would not see it that way. She had taught them that soldiers protect those who cannot protect themselves. She had taught them about standing up to injustice. She had taught them to fight smart when they could not fight strong. 5 days. The tribunal would be a formality. The admiral had already decided her fate. She would be accused, convicted, and removed. Maybe deported. Maybe worse. Hana looked at her lesson plans for the next week. She made a decision. If she only had 5 days, she would make them count. She would teach the cubs everything they needed to know. Not because she expected them to help her, but because they deserved to know the truth about how the world really worked. The morning of the tribunal arrived cold and gray. Hana woke up at dawn, her stomach tight with fear. She dressed in her best clothes, trying to look professional and calm. Outside her window, the station buzzed with normal activity. Soldiers walked their routes. Workers started their shifts. No one seemed to care that in a few hours, a human teacher would face judgment from people who had already decided to get rid of her. Yuna knocked on her door. The medical officer looked like she had not slept. "I tried everything," she said. "I contacted Warlord Thexlar. I sent messages to every diplomatic channel I could find. Nothing is getting through. Hana, I am so sorry. It is not your fault," Hana said. She hugged her friend. "You did what you could. Now I have to face this." At 8 in the morning, 2 Threxian guards came to escort her. They were not rough, but they made it clear she had no choice. They walked her through the station, toward the military command section. Hana noticed the corridors were emptier than usual. Most of the Threxian soldiers and workers had been directed elsewhere. The Admiral wanted this quiet. As they walked past the education wing, Hana glanced at her classroom. The door was closed. The cubs should have been in class by now, but the room was dark. She wondered where they were. Probably their parents kept them home, not wanting them to see their teacher taken away. The tribunal chamber was a large room with high ceilings. Admiral Zendros sat at the center of a long table, with 6 other military officers beside him. They all wore their formal armor, polished and impressive. Hana was directed to stand alone in the center of the room, facing them. Admiral Zendros was massive even for a Threxian, with deep black exoskeleton and red markings that showed his rank. His 4 eyes looked at Hana with cold disgust. "Hana Kang, human teacher, you stand accused of cultural contamination, unauthorized teaching of military tactics to minors, and actions designed to undermine Threxian values. How do you respond?" Unquote. "I taught the curriculum I was hired to teach," Hana said. Her voice was steady, even though her hands shook. "I taught mathematics, history, strategy, and ethics. Everything I did was within the scope of my contract. You taught our children to question authority," the Admiral said. "You taught them cooperation over individual strength. You filled their heads with human weakness, disguised as wisdom." "I taught them to think," Hana replied. The Admiral stood up, his full height making him tower over the table. "That is precisely the problem. Young Threxians do not need to think. They need to obey. They need to be strong. You have contaminated an entire generation with your soft human ideals." One of the other officers placed a datapad on the table. "We have evidence of your crimes, lesson plans teaching guerrilla warfare, stories about humans defeating superior enemies through deception, games that reward cooperation over dominance. You have systematically worked to make our children weak." Hana wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that teaching children to think did not make them weak, but she could see it in their eyes. They did not care about truth. This tribunal was not about justice. It was about removing her and sending a message to other humans. What Hana did not know was that 12 young Threxians were watching from the ventilation system above. The cubs had not gone home. They had not stayed in their rooms. When their parents tried to keep them away from the tribunal, the cubs had done something unprecedented. They had worked together to escape. In the classroom, which now looked very different, Vesa stood at the main desk. Maps of the station covered every wall. Datapads were arranged in careful rows, displaying security feeds they had hacked into. The wooden pieces they used for tactical exercises were now arranged to show the real layout of the command section. "Teacher Hana is in the main chamber," one cub reported. He was monitoring a datapad. "Admiral Zendros is presenting evidence against her." Crix paced back and forth, his 4 arms moving as he thought. "We need the files. The real files. The ones that show what the Admiral is actually planning." Another cub, small with green markings, raised his hand. "I know where they are. My mother is a security officer. The Admiral keeps his personal files in his quarters, on the command level. But it is protected. We cannot just walk in." "We do not need to walk in," Vesa said. She pointed to the map, showing the ventilation system. "We go through the maintenance shafts. Remember what Teacher Hana taught us about the Vietnam tunnels? Small bodies can go where large ones cannot." "That is dangerous," one cub said nervously. If we are caught, Teacher Hana is in danger right now, Crick said firmly. She taught us that soldiers protect those who cannot protect themselves. She cannot protect herself. We can. The cubs had spent 3 days planning this. After Hana told them she might be in trouble, they had used every skill she taught them. They hacked their parents' security codes by watching and memorizing key patterns. They studied the station schematics during their free time. They created diversions and alibis. They worked together like a military unit. Each cub knowing their exact role. Team 1, create the diversion, Crix ordered. Team 2, access the Admiral's quarters and download the files. Team 3, prepare the broadcast system. We do this exactly as planned. Understood? All 12 cubs nodded. They had transformed their classroom into what Hana would have called a war chamber. A place where battles were planned and strategies were formed. But this was not a training exercise. This was real. 3 cubs left through the ventilation shaft, heading toward the power distribution center. Their job was to trigger emergency alerts in empty sections of the station, pulling security forces away from the command level. They moved through the narrow shafts with ease, their smaller bodies perfect for this kind of infiltration. 4 other cubs, including the small, green-marked one, headed toward the Admiral's quarters. They knew the route through the maintenance system. They knew which shafts were monitored and which were not. They moved in complete silence, communicating with hand signals Hana had taught them. Back in the tribunal chamber, Admiral Zendros was finishing his presentation. The evidence is clear. This human has poisoned young minds with her teachings. I recommend immediate deportation and a ban on all human educational contractors in this sector. Hana stood quietly. There was nothing she could say that would change their minds. She had lost. All she could hope for now was that the cubs would remember her lessons and use them to become better than their parents. Then, across the station, alarms started going off. Fire suppression systems activated in 3 different sections. Security teams rushed to respond. The tribunal chamber's communications lit up with emergency reports. Admiral Zendros looked annoyed. "What is happening?" he demanded. One officer checked his datapad. "False alarms, sir. Multiple systems triggered simultaneously in unpopulated areas. It appears to be a malfunction." But it was not a malfunction. It was exactly what the cubs had planned. And while security forces rushed to investigate the false emergencies, 4 young Threxians climbed through a ventilation shaft into Admiral Zendros's private quarters. The room was neat and organized, full of military decorations and weapons. The cubs moved quickly to his personal terminal. The green-marked cub pulled out a small device Vesa had built from spare parts. It bypassed the security lock in seconds. "We are in," he whispered into his communicator. "Downloading files now." Back in the classroom war chamber, Vesa received the transmission. "Team 2 successful. Prepare for broadcast." She looked at the other cubs. They had practiced this. They knew what to do. But now that the moment was here, she felt scared. They were children going against an admiral. If this failed, they would all be punished. Then she thought about Teacher Hana, standing alone in that chamber, facing people who wanted to destroy her for teaching them to think. Vesa's fear turned into determination. "Upload the files to the broadcast system," she ordered. "All of them. Every piece of evidence. We show everyone what the Admiral really is." This was no longer just a rescue. This was a revolution, led by 12 cubs who had learned that true strength came from intelligence, cooperation, and the courage to stand up for what was right. The moment came without warning. Every screen in the tribunal chamber suddenly went dark, then flickered back to life. Admiral Zendros looked up in surprise. On every monitor, on every display across the entire station, 12 young faces appeared. Crick spoke first. His voice, amplified through the station-wide communication system, was clear and strong. "We are the students of Teacher Hana Kang. We are the future of Threxia. We have something important to show you." In the tribunal chamber, Admiral Zendros stood up violently. "What is this? Shut it down." But the officers could not shut it down. The cubs had locked out the control systems, using methods Hana had taught them during a lesson about computer security. The broadcast continued. Vesa appeared on screen next. "Admiral Zendros has accused our teacher of corrupting us. He says she made us weak. But we have evidence that shows the Admiral is the one who has betrayed our people." The screens changed. Documents appeared, showing encrypted messages the cubs had found in the Admiral's personal files. Messages about planning attacks on human civilian transports. Messages about fabricating evidence against human contractors. Messages about working with extremist groups who wanted to restart the war with humanity. One of the cubs, the small one with green markings, explained each document in simple, clear terms. This message shows the Admiral planned to blame humans for an attack that his own forces would commit. This message shows him lying to the High Command about human activities. This message shows him taking money from groups that want war. The cubs had organized the evidence like one of Hana's lesson plans. They stated facts. They showed sources. They even prepared responses to arguments the Admiral might make. Across the station, Threxian parents and workers stopped what they were doing. They watched their children present evidence of treason with the precision of trained investigators. Warlord Thexlar stood in his command center, staring at the screen in shock. His son was leading a military-grade intelligence operation. In the tribunal chamber, Admiral Zendros's face turned dark with rage. "Guards, find those cubs and stop this broadcast." But the guards did not move. They were watching the screens too. The evidence was overwhelming. The Admiral had committed crimes against both Threxian law and the peace treaty with humans. Everyone could see it now. Crix returned to the screen. "Teacher, Hana did not make us weak. She made us strong enough to see the truth. She taught us that real power comes from thinking, from working together, from having the courage to stand against evil even when it is dangerous. She taught us to be better than we were." Hana stood in the center of the tribunal chamber, tears running down her face. She had not asked for this. She had not wanted the cubs to risk themselves. But they had done it anyway. They had taken everything she taught them and used it to save her. The broadcast ended with a final message from all 12 cubs together. "We request that the High Command review this evidence. We request that Teacher Hana be cleared of all charges. We request that Admiral Zendros be held accountable for his crimes. We are young, but we know right from wrong, and we will not be silent." The screens went back to normal. The tribunal chamber was completely quiet. Admiral Zendros looked around at the other officers. He could see it in their eyes. He had lost. Not because humans had defeated him, but because Threxian children had exposed him. Within minutes, communications came from the Threxian High Command. They had received the broadcast. They ordered the Admiral's immediate arrest. They demanded a full investigation. They sent apologies to the human embassy and promised that Hana would be protected. Guards entered the chamber. But this time, they walked past Hana. They went to Admiral Zendros. He did not fight. He stood there, defeated by children he had considered weak and corrupted. Warlord Thexlar arrived at the tribunal chamber shortly after. He looked at Hana with an expression she could not quite read. Respect? Fear? Wonder? "The cubs are waiting for you in the classroom," he said quietly. "They want to know if you are safe." Hana nodded and left the chamber. Her legs felt weak as she walked through the corridors. Threxian soldiers and workers stared at her as she passed. Some nodded with respect. Others looked confused. The human teacher, who was supposed to be deported, was now walking free, protected by the same system that had tried to remove her. When she reached the classroom, the door was open. Inside, 12 exhausted young Threxians waited. Maps still covered the walls. Datapads were scattered everywhere. The room looked like a real military command center after a successful operation. The moment Hana entered, all 12 cubs rushed to her. They surrounded her, their forearms reaching out, their voices talking over each other, asking if she was okay. Hana hugged them, all of them, feeling their solid exoskeletons and their surprisingly gentle embraces. "You should not have done that," Hana said, but her voice was full of love, not anger. "You put yourselves in danger. You taught us that soldiers protect those who cannot protect themselves," Crix said. "You could not protect yourself, so we did it," Vesa added. "You taught us to think strategically, to use our resources, to work as a team. We just used your lessons, Teacher Hana." The door opened again. More Threxians entered. Parents of the cubs, including Warlord Thexlar. They looked at the transformed classroom, at the evidence of sophisticated planning and execution. They looked at their children, who had just conducted an operation that would have impressed trained military officers. Warlord Thexlar stepped forward. In front of everyone, this powerful military commander bowed to Hana. It was a gesture of deep respect in Threxian culture. "You taught them to think like humans," he said. "I believed that would make them weak. Instead, you made them stronger than we ever could have. You made them capable of seeing truth even when we tried to hide it. You made them brave enough to stand up for justice even when it was dangerous." He looked at his son, Crix. "I thought I knew what strength was. I was wrong. These cubs are stronger than any of us because they can think for themselves." The other parents nodded. They had seen what their children could do. They had seen cooperation, defeat, individual power. They had seen strategy, defeat authority. They had seen young minds solve problems that adults had created. Over the next weeks, things changed rapidly. The Threxian government asked Hana to stay. They offered her a position as director of a new educational program that would combine Threxian and human teaching methods. They wanted her to train other teachers. They wanted to spread what she had done with these 12 cubs to other young Threxians across the empire. Hana accepted, but with conditions. She wanted Yuna to be part of the program. She wanted protection for all human contractors. She wanted the right to teach the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. The government agreed to everything. The classroom stayed mostly the same. Hana added one decoration, though. On the wall, in both human English and Threxian script, a new rule appeared. "We only turn this room into a war chamber for very good reasons. And we must always be sure we are right." On her last day teaching the 12 original cubs before they moved to the next level of education, Crix raised one of his 4 arms. "Teacher Hana, how do we know when we are sure we are right?" Hana smiled at the question. It was the right question to ask. Being sure you are right requires honesty, research, listening to different perspectives, and being willing to admit when you are wrong. It means thinking carefully about consequences. It means considering whether your actions help or harm others. It is not easy. Many adults never learn how to do it properly. "Will you teach us?" Vesa asked. "I will teach you everything I can," Hana promised. "And then, you will teach yourselves. Because that is what real education is. Not filling your heads with facts, but teaching you how to think, so you can find truth on your own." The cubs nodded, understanding. They had learned so much in 6 months. They had learned mathematics, and history, and strategy. But more importantly, they had learned to question, to cooperate, to think critically, and to stand up for what was right. As Hana looked at her students, she realized something. She had come to this station thinking she would teach alien children. Instead, they had taught her. They had shown her that intelligence and courage were not limited by species. They had shown her that the future could be better than the past if people were willing to think differently. The camera would pull back from the classroom now, showing a space that held both Threxian military honors and human educational awards. A place where 2 species learned from each other. A place where children became heroes by choosing wisdom over tradition. And in that classroom, a human teacher, and 12 young Threxians continued their lessons together, preparing for a future where strength meant more than just physical power, a future where cooperation defeated domination, a future that both species would build together, one lesson at a time.